What if those less than ideal things in our lives, right? So our limitations, our constraints, the aspects of life we consider to be, a bad hand. What if they weren't just things we need to learn to accept or little tragedies we have to live with? What if they were ultimately the aspects of our lives that create the best of us? The elements of our world that push us to our greatness. And this came to mind earlier. I was listening to a book called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson. And he explores this point. He talks about Socrates in ancient Athens and how he lived in abject poverty. How, according to the standards of ancient Athens, was not an attractive person by any means. Just seemed to have a lot working against him. And the question that's posed is whether these exact circumstances ultimately created the man that became one of the most important thinkers in history. He implies that his reality and his surroundings shaped his worldview, so it only makes sense for one to conclude that all of it contributed to the life he lived. If Socrates was born wealthy and attractive and all these things, could he have become the man that he became? Probably not. And the reason I love this is because, to put it simply, it reframes those less than ideal circumstances in our lives. Whether it is a personal trait we have no control over or an occurrence we deal with. It's understanding that a lack of ability in one area helps guide us to that spot where we can thrive. A disappointment we encounter helps us regroup and make our way to the thing that is ultimately best. The less than ideal, the things that at surface level seem bad or problematic, they're always working for us to push us towards our contentment and our growth, to our greatness. I can say on my end, it was the turbulence I experienced in my life that created that sense of curiosity for me. It was a lack of understanding that pushed me to write about life, explore the hardships we face, and the resilience of the human spirit through it all. There's a pretty famous Stoic idea that states we can't often control what happens, but we can always control how we respond to what happens. And there lies the power in the understanding that when one door closes, as the saying goes, you are pushed closer to the one that will open for you. You have to decide whether you will find it within yourself to open it. Or will you focus on the lack, the gap, what's not there, what you don't have, what went wrong? See, all those things, the things that most people use as their reason to stop or quit or not go, they can be the reason you lose, or they can be the very reason you win. You find a way. But that means moving forward, trusting there is good to be had, understanding that everything that goes creates space for what truly needs to be there. I understand it's common, right? But it's not just a cliche that adversity creates us, that difficult times shape us. Why? Because we are transformed by the bad and the difficult, and that which in the moment does not seem ideal. Because they force us to move further into what we were meant to do and who we were meant to be. Just like Socrates was created from his adverse situation, his brilliance derived from his circumstance, your greatness will be derived from yours. So remember that next time you feel as though you've been slighted by life or something's been taken away from you. While it may feel negative, and I get it, from time to time it does, it ultimately becomes the wind at your back, bringing you where you most need to be. There's a connectedness that I want to call our attention to, a connecting of dots. Let's reverse engineer this simple idea, okay? Life's trajectory is most inclined to change in our biggest moments, right? It's the opportunities that come around once in a blue moon, when it's all on the line. The moments where we have to operate under tension. How do you perform when the lights are the brightest, when the outcome weighs heavy? We only get a few truly revolutionizing opportunities in life, and we must be our best in those moments. Okay, but how? That's the million-dollar question. And as far as I'm concerned, the answer is in the mundane, the boring things. The answer is in repetition of the tiny steps that stack up again and again and again. See, a lot of people can picture the big opportunities, right? A lot of people dream of having the ball in their hands, down by 1 with 3 seconds left on the clock. But they're not at their gym. They're not chipping away at their physique or their health. They're not studying the ins and outs of the game. Nah, that stuff's boring. Just give me the ball with the game on the line, I'll figure it out, right? Except that's not how the world works. My friends, as the saying goes, confidence is earned. I want to tell you about a wall in my studio, a blank wall. And as I've moved over the years, it's changed color, it's changed shape, but it's always been there. And it's heard me speaking directly to it for thousands of hours at this point. It's seen me stand up, put a rug in the center of the room, and talk to it like it was an audience at Gillette Stadium, again and again and again. Not because it was fun. No, it was tedious and, to be honest, sometimes annoying. But look, if we're reverse engineering those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, what I always knew was that I'd be ready, because that one opportunity isn't really about that one opportunity. It's about all you've stacked up along the way, all you've built. It's enabling the mind, when you walk on stage and the lights go on, to think, oh, this isn't special. This is just muscle memory. I've already paid the price. I've already won. I've already suffered, lost, learned, and grown. This is just where I collect my prize. And so, my friends, I ask of you, what is your equivalent of my blank wall? Where are you creating those reps? How are you building yourself up? So that when those fleeting opportunities do arrive, you don't get worked up. You don't ask anything of yourself that you're not equipped to give. You simply smile and think, I've earned this. This is who I am. And now, the world will finally see. We all enjoy the prospect of perfection. And everyone has an ideal outcome. We all make plans. But very rarely do they unfold as they were drawn up. Why? Well, because life is predictably unpredictable. It's mysterious. Yet for some reason, we march on toward the acquisition of a flawless existence. Scared of anything but an undamaged, untarnished, immaculate reflection staring back at us in the mirror. But in the real world, our happiness, contentment, growth, progress, they're not a product of perfection. They're built from the imperfections that we collect along the way. The trials, the tribulations. When you piece all that together like little puzzle pieces, they depict the beauty. They show the image that's always been so highly coveted. In other words, the process of rebuilding creates something more valuable than the same pieces before they were broken down, when they were untouched. In Japanese philosophy, there's a concept known as kintsugi, which is the art of repairing broken pottery with a golden lacquer. It's the idea that we don't want to hide the damage, but we want to rebuild it into something more meaningful, more valuable. Embrace the imperfect, own and cherish it. There's an old story about a tea master known as Rikyu. And he was attending a Japanese tea ceremony with one of his followers, and the follower tries to impress Rikyu by buying this fancy clay jar and making it visible during the meeting. But Rikyu never, once acknowledges it. The praise never comes. So the student, obviously upset by the lack of recognition, he pushes the jar off the counter. It falls to the floor. It breaks into a bunch of pieces. And another student ultimately repairs it using kintsugi. Right? Puts the pieces back together with a gold lacquer. And next time Rikyu attends the tea ceremony as a guest of honor, he sees the jar rebuilt and says, now it's beautiful. Now it has character. He acknowledges its value. And this story reminds us about the myth of perfection. Right? Life's not about dodging and avoiding the difficulty. It's about facing it head on. Because when we come out on the other side, we transform into something that was previously unobtainable and rise to a world beyond imagination. See, we change not by running around life's obstacles, but by running directly through them. Like a muscle being repeatedly broken down and built back up, the pain, the exhausted energy is the vehicle. The micro creates the macro. The difficult becomes the exceptional. We need the very things we're inclined to avoid. Our shortcomings, they not only precede and establish our greatness, they are our greatness. Being broken is not a tragedy, it is a step along the way. It's the beginning of something new, a launching pad, a chance to be better than you have ever been. Because look, here's the reality. If your status quo has never been shaken at its foundation, if you've never stopped and questioned the way things are, reality as it is, if you don't take risks, there will be no fragments to take and rebuild. You won't have the tools or capacity to change the world around you. And that is the thing of note. Beauty is not fearing the rebuild, it is the rebuild. It's not feeling sorry or hopeless, but hopeful. Seeing your situation for what it is, an opportunity. It is what you need, a blank canvas, your chance to make art while redrawing creative boundaries. If perfect is the goal, why take the step? Why take the chance? Why risk messing things up? It's never been about perfect. It's about picking up the pieces and rising again. There's an old quote that states 80% of life is showing up. Now, showing up means many different things to many different people, but the idea is not complicated. You can't do anything of significance unless you have first and foremost arrived. Which brings me to today. See, I had a list of concepts I've been excited to talk about, things that I've either read or have been recent epiphanies in my life. And I can't wait to share those with you. But this morning, let me tell you about this morning. Right, finding the energy to do anything felt like trying to squeeze blood from a rock. I woke up with a headache, exhausted because I didn't sleep at all the night before. And you know that feeling, like when you didn't sleep at all the night before, you're oddly constantly reminding yourself the next day that you didn't sleep, and everything just felt off. And really, as I'm speaking now, things still kind of do. And so I got up and I sort of played with the idea of taking the day off altogether. Right? Maybe I'm due for one anyway. I thought about resting. The little devil with the pitchfork on my shoulder continuously reminded me how great sleep would feel. And I was sitting there, kind of weighing my options. Took some ibuprofen, started the coffee, sat down on the couch, just kind of looking at the wall, what to do. But realistically, I knew. And I want to explain why. Over the years, I've taught myself through repetition that sitting down and writing and recording, unless I plan intentionally to do otherwise, is a non-negotiable. It's helped me see that the goal in any meaningful pursuit should be getting to the point where, despite the circumstances, you show up. Stephen Pressfield, whose voice often echoes in my mind when I come face to face with these situations, he wrote, "Art is war between ourselves and the forces of self-sabotage that would stop us from doing our work. The artist is a warrior." Artist being anyone bringing something to the world that does not yet exist. And he goes on to describe the battle with the mind over sitting down in that chair and writing when we know we must write but don't want to. When a tired or distracted mind begins looking for off-ramps, as mine had clearly started doing this morning. These seemingly trivial moments, when any rational soul could argue for the validity of postponing their date with Microsoft Word, well, they come to matter more than ever. Because greatness is a byproduct of intentionality. If you become accustomed to breaking promises to yourself, if you leave that door cracked for exceptions here and there, it will ultimately be kicked open. And that's why I inject little reminders like that into my life, to keep that mental muscle working. For example, there can never be dishes left in my sink when I go to bed. Why? Because if I skip it once, there will always exist reasons to skip again. It's a very easy thing to not care about. Because here is the reality. Progress is a lifestyle. Growth is a lifestyle. At least if we're talking about any meaningful type of evolution. I just finished reading It Takes What It Takes by Trevor Moawad. One of those 3 to 5 hour listens on Audible, depending on how fast it's playing. It really packs a punch. And I'm going to be diving into a few of his concepts a little more in the coming weeks. But one thing he discusses that I found incredibly valuable is the illusion of choice. And what the illusion of choice highlights is that there are a set of behaviors that must be carried out to be effective. The idea of alternate routes is an illusion. There are no choices when it comes to what's necessary. We know what must be done to win. Now, knowing that is one thing. Knowing that and having to propel yourself to action when you feel like garbage is something different entirely. But that's why it's so valuable to get to that place where you can take the emotion out, remove the internal deliberation, and automate the things you know are going to help push you to be that better version of yourself. In other words, you show up for you, period, and that is a non-negotiable. That's the level we all need to get to. And I'm thinking about this, drawing parallels to a lot of different aspects of my day, right? The interval training I have this afternoon. When you're exhausted, 40 minutes in, and are switching from squats to mountain climbers or whatever it is, right? Instructor makes the announcement. I don't think about anything. I don't give myself a chance to try and rationalize any weakness. I know, if this is important to me, keep that door shut. No thinking, just doing next. Simply doing what you always do, what you've signed up for, cannot be self-perceived as some monumental sacrifice. No, it's just what you do. It's neutral. Sometimes you feel like it, sometimes you don't. But you do what you do. And that puts you on track to accomplish some incredible things. And so remembering this ultimately pushed me through that studio door this morning and placed me down right in front of my mic. Sure, I had to adjust some things. Definitely picked some, mellower music. There's going to be no crescendos today or my head will explode. But this is not torture. In fact, I'm really happy with the way the episode's turning out. I would have missed out on something that I think is going to be pretty valuable in a variety of ways. But what I'm telling myself is that this is not a victory. It's certainly not defeat. It's just what I do. And so the question worth asking yourself when facing the adversity life presents, in whatever arena you are in, is, are you willing to show up for you? Can you turn that internal deliberation switch off when it comes to the necessities before you? Minimize that rationalizing that I battled with this morning. We don't need or want that. There should be no thinking, no cracked doors, no metaphorical dishes in the sink. If you decide something is important and you sign that dotted line, when it's time to execute, you act. And then you move directly onto the next. The goal is to not even negotiate with weakness. Now, that's not to say Pressfield's aforementioned war of art won't rage on as you journey to the new horizons you've set out for. But just like anything, it's an understanding that will help you focus, will help you say no to the distractions and the minutia, and continue writing your story, constructing your reality line by line and piece by piece. I was at the Heat Celtics game with my brother a few days ago, and the Celtics at the moment are the best team in basketball, which is fun being that we're from Boston originally, and right now the team has a handful of really good players. But one of them, Jason Tatum, has essentially separated himself as one of the most dominant players in the game, right? He's a superstar. And as we watched him play from the stands, we were talking about a narrative that I don't hear mentioned a lot. And maybe it is in basketball circles, but I don't hear it much out and about. I think it's incredible. It's the fact that Boston's general manager at the time, Danny Ainge, saw value in Tatum way before everybody else. Now, don't get me wrong, he was always elite. But the Celtics GM saw superstar potential in Tatum to a much greater extent than everyone else, right? In fact, in the 2017 draft, the Celtics had the first overall pick. And, for those unfamiliar, it's usually pretty obvious how the first handful of picks are going to go, right? The players are all ranked before the draft, and the team with the first pick is going to select the first best player, obviously. The team with the second pick is going to select the second best player. And while it was sort of known that Tatum was the agreed upon third best player in the draft, that the Celtics didn't want number 1 and 2. even though the scouts and draft boards and, the talking heads all around the country saw them as better, right? So here's Danny Ainge with that coveted number 1 overall pick, which in basketball is so valuable. And he's like, I don't care. I want the guy who's projected number 3. Right? So he trades down. He gives Philly his number 1 pick, basically saying, hey, if the guy I want is going to go 3rd anyway, might as well trade away the first pick and get a little extra value, right? And still get Tatum at number 3. And that's exactly what they did. And here we are, watching him as one of the best players in the game. And by the way, the guy who went 1st overall is relatively underperformed given where he was picked. The guy who went number 2 overall, same, has been up and down, constant injury issues. And I look back at how that played out, and I just think like the pressure, the weight of having this coveted pick and being like, no, I don't want it, right? The guy that I want is number 3, right? Being so confident that you see value where others don't. It's hard to do that with conviction. So I look at this, and sure, he made some mistakes, as all GMs do. You can't predict the future. It's a numbers game, right? But the ability to spot value, particularly in places others seem to disregard, is what I see as the difference between excellence and mediocrity. Life is always trying to give us the equivalent of a draft board, right? In some capacity. It's like, here's what's normal, here's what's projected. Number 1, 2, and 3 options are the quote-unquote best options. And for the most part, sure, it's a decent guideline, but it's not enough. It's not enough. I think we need to train ourselves to be asking, yeah, but where is the move that manifests into that game-changing difference? Where in my life is the move that pushes me over the top, the action that sets me apart? As staying on the basketball theme, one of the most inspiring things I'd ever heard was Kobe in an interview talking about the extra value he'd capitalize on throughout the day, being the difference in his career, saying, look, if I get up 2 hours before everyone else and I get a workout in, not once in a while, but every day, that's the difference. Why? Well, in a week, it's nothing. In a month, it's not much. In 6 months, it creates a gap. In a year, that's quite the advantage. In 5 years, you're not even on the same level. In a decade, he is now untouchable to his competition. Yeah, it's just the morning. Everyone has the morning, but Kobe saw it and recognized it as opportunity, as his value. The consensus out there in the world is that the morning is when you ease into your day, right? It doesn't put what you're doing at 6 a.m. high on that metaphorical draft board. No, it's who cares? Well, to Kobe, perfect. There's the value that I can spot, that I can utilize, that most people will not even think about. And in totality, I believe that to be the truth, right? Like, you can do fine simply anticipating and living in and around the value as identified by the majority, by following their blueprint. But to separate, to move from adequate to excellence, you need to find those places where you can squeeze more out of life. You need to dive deeper into what's around you than, that's what's expected, or that's what everyone else is doing. That's what's perceived as valuable. Be your own GM, right? Question the way of things. Not just out in the world, but in your home, in your day-to-day. Where are the moves that can take you from a 6 inefficiency to an 8? What ways can you be unconventional? Flip the script to unveil the value you've been walking by for months, years, maybe even your whole life without realizing. There are always pieces around us to be great. And not just get by or survive, but thrive. There are the necessary ingredients to our right and left, always, to astound ourselves. We just have to arrange them in a way that allows us to maximize their value. It's a constant moving of parts. Trying again and again, but not settling for a ranking system to life as prescribed by the outside world. There's more if you're willing to find it.